Good morning, everyone. We are very happy to have you here with us today. My name is Ewa Kocińska-Lange, and I'm managing the NCBR, so National Center for Research and Development of Poland office in Brussels that is operating together with Business Science Poland. And this is another event from our series Brussels Talks. And we are very honored and very happy to have with us Mr. Wolfgang Philipp, who is the acting director of the new DG at the European Commission, Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, HERA, the famous HERA, let's say, that we've been talking for quite some time already. So welcome and good morning, Philipp. It's very nice to have you with us. And the goal of this event is for all of you to find out more about HERA's plan, a bit of background and the beginnings, and the plans that we have at the moment for this year, but in general also the vision for the future. We all remember, obviously, the beginnings of our problems with pandemic. More or less 2 years ago, the whole world stopped, and we were really puzzled what to do, how to manage, and what to do first. Now we all hope, I think, that this is the end. But this is still a hope. It's far from being certain, I think. We all try to, I think, live in our countries like almost like before. But still here and there we read some news about pandemic still being active, and our friends and families and ourselves also from time to time still catching the virus. But this is just this pandemic. Who knows what will be next, or what will happen in general in terms of health issues in the future. So I think that the response, let's say, of the European Commission to coordinate a bit more the activities and efforts of member states in terms of health, potential health crisis is very, very timely and very needed. We will be very happy to hear from you, Wolfgang, first of all, about, as I said, the beginnings, the planning for now, the ambitions of HERA. We also received quite some questions already from participants during registrations. So we already have some. I also have some questions to you myself, and I also hope that you as participants will also post some questions in the chat. So please be active. Please use the chat box for questions. I hope we will manage to answer them all. And in case, of course, also of some technical issues or something, that just also let us know via the chat. We will help you as much as we can. You will also receive the slides after the event, so be assured that this is coming. In case of any questions also to us later on, you can contact us by email. So I think that's it from my side as it comes to introduction. Just maybe a few more words about Wolfgang Philipp. He has a PhD in microbiology of the University of Paris in France, of course, and has been working in tuberculosis research for quite some time at the Institute Pasteur, and also in Switzerland, Universities of Bern and Basel, and was a member of the Basel Institute of Immunology before joining the Commission in 2001. So quite some experience already at the Commission itself as well, and we will be very happy to hear from you now. So Wolfgang, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Eva, and many thanks for the invitation this morning for this Brussels Talks round on HERA. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to share with you, first of all, an overview of how HERA has been set up. Secondly, then to look a little bit into what we are planning to do, and hopefully I'll be able to pass the message in how far HERA could contribute to be better prepared to more swiftly respond to future health emergencies, at least better and more swiftly as it was the case at the beginning of COVID-19, which, and here I would not share I would not share your optimism, which is not over and which might also bounce back again later during the year. We have to see that, but nevertheless, it's all a matter of preparedness, and HERA is one of the elements. What is no surprise is that this pandemic and the repercussions of that pandemic resulted in a, let me put this on, resulted in a strong wave of momentum to strengthen health initiatives at national level, but most importantly also at European and global level. We have all seen that the response to COVID-19 at the beginning, despite pandemics, several pandemics, epidemics throughout the past 20 years was relatively slow, relatively unorganized, at least when it comes to cross-border coordination. And it was a long journey, basically, to get to a point that we return to, kind of normal life now again. But in particular, to reinforce the EU's resilience for cross-border health threats, in the past months, the Commission has put forward, and you may have seen these papers, several proposals to create a strong policy framework for a stronger European health union, as we call it. One of these building blocks of the European Health Union is indeed HERA, a very tangible achievement, which was officially launched already in October 2021. So we are now half a year old, and we try to become operational, and we become more operational day by day. So the overarching mission of HERA is to address cross-border health threats in an all-threat approach. That means we are looking at not just at infectious diseases, but also threats stemming from chemical or environmental or totally unknown sources. And we do this by by promoting research, development, production, and distribution of medical countermeasures. That implies obviously vaccines, medical products, medicines, but also, let's say, simpler products like gloves, masks, personal protective equipment, and all kind of equipment that is indeed needed to be able to respond swiftly and in a structured way to upcoming health emergencies. What is very clear is that COVID will not be the last public health emergency. We will inevitably face future health emergencies, outbreaks that might be regionally restricted, but also pandemics. And therefore, it's absolutely clear that we need more appropriate tools to react and to respond to these future epidemics and pandemics. And that requires obviously not just a lot of efforts, a lot of funding, a lot of imagination. It requires also very good decision making and ideally evidence-based decision making. But that's not always possible, as we have seen during this pandemic. So getting closer to that stage would be already an achievement. And obviously, that's what we're doing. We try to draw the right lessons from the ongoing and earlier pandemics. That was done, you might say, you might want to say that this is something that happened already in the past pandemic. We remember the influenza pandemic in 2010. We remember Ebola. We remember SARS at the beginning of the century, and so on and so forth. And you might say, good, there were a lot of lessons learned and a lot of exercises run. What was the effect? The effect was that we were quite exposed at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. This is true. So I think this time that is something we need to get right. And with HERA, the EU has equipped itself and the member states with a complete end-to-end solution. That sounds like a great word, but it has a very simple goal, and that is to better anticipate cross-border health threats and enhance preparedness planning that would then lead to swifter and more effective response capacities at all levels and across all sectors. And HERA is focusing here on ensuring that appropriate medical countermeasures are available at scale and where they're needed, not only for pandemics, but also for man-made threats. And we are looking here at, for example, bioterrorism, intentional release of health threats, of certain health threats. Sorry, as I mentioned already at the beginning, including chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear threats, and also threats from environmental sources. So HERA is a new element that complements and that reinforces the EU health security architecture, making health security indeed a collective endeavor and bringing added value to the work which is carried out by other players in the field, including, for example, done by the ECDC and EMA. All in all, HERA will improve the union's development, manufacturing, procurement and distribution of key medical countermeasures within the EU. This is just a short outline of potential threats and medical countermeasures that we might be looking into, but that is obviously all ongoing work. Now coming to the governance structure. HERA was set up as a commission service for several reasons. It was perhaps a surprise that it was not an agency as it was originally announced or planned, but there are good reasons for it. One of the reasons is speed. Establishing an agency would have taken too much time. At a minimum, it would have taken 2 years, 3 years of interinstitutional negotiations, not just on the framework, but also on budgets and so on and so forth. Money. The multi-annual financial framework negotiations were just concluded, and there was no specific budget line for a new agency foreseen. So by establishing HERA as an internal commission service, and that's what we are, like other DGs are commission services, we were able to make use of the existing budgets from, and here particularly from EU for Health, the health program, Horizon Europe, the research program, and then the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. And here we are relying on the rescEU budget. And another even more important point is that is obviously agility, that the existing models of European agencies do not allow for agile decision making by virtue or by the legal character, so the framework, but the Commission can easily redeploy staff and mobilize funds in case of urgencies, as we have seen it. So therefore, HERA as a Commission service is certainly the more agile solution. But let me also highlight that HERA is designed to be a flexible structure. So we are not there to entertain ourselves. We are there to foresee what can be foreseen to be better prepared for future health emergencies. And in 2025, the Commission will conduct an in-depth review on the implementation of the operations of HERA, including obviously on its structure, governance, and functioning. And then we will see how that all continues. Now, the governance. COVID reminded us all that the viruses do not respect international boundaries. I mean, that sounds like a very simplified view of things, but nevertheless, it is therefore crucial that we consider to integrally include member states in the HERA governance. That is also a novum when it comes to a commission service. So member states are full members of the HERA board and of the health crisis board. So that is the board that takes care of the operations and decisions in case of a crisis. So that is, as I said, an unprecedented governance configuration that aims to ensure complementarity between the EU and national actions in the field of health preparedness to cross-border health threats and response capacities. And that is not there to control anything, but to make sure that that we work in full synchrony and complementarity with activities going on, and there's many activities going on in many member states, reinforcing their health preparedness and response capacities and capabilities. In addition, building a close relation between the policymakers and academia is obviously essential to ensure the preparedness for future challenges. And then, thanks to the opportunities offered by advances in science and technology, that is the baseline of our work, obviously. And with this in mind, with the HERA Advisory Forum, we are engaging with researchers and scientists as much as possible to design evidence-based interventions in the field of pandemic preparedness and response. And we just had the first meeting of that HERA Advisory Forum yesterday with representatives of member states that will then basically advise the HERA board in particular on developments in science and technology. It might sound all a bit theoretical, but it comes with a number of very important implications, as we have seen it with SARS-CoV-2 and response to it. And here we've seen that only a concerted effort of funders of industry, academia, government agencies, regulatory bodies that have been very flexible, foundations and NGOs has yielded a range of remarkable effective vaccines and a large number of antiviral therapies, I would say in record time. But this rapid success is based on a very long period of massive public and private investments in science and technology. You all are aware of the long-lasting investments into the use of mRNA technology, originally for cancer treatments. That were investments over the past 30 years, and now we were able to use these results and include it in the development of well-functioning and very effective vaccines. And we have been able to come up with a large number of vaccine candidates that were produced basically within months after the sequence of SARS-CoV-2. In addition, with this advisory forum, we are in the process of creating two expert groups. One is a civil society forum, and the second one is a joint industrial cooperation forum that was also mentioned in the communication on setting up HERA, to ensure a broad cooperation with a wide variety of stakeholders to identify common priorities and also solutions for pandemic solutions and priorities for pandemic preparedness and response. In general terms, regarding the mode of its functioning, HERA has two ways. One is the preparedness phase, where HERA's functions span from monitoring and intelligence gathering to supporting research and innovation, production and manufacturing capacities, as well as procurement, stockpiling, and distribution of medical countermeasures. So basically, this end-to-end solution that I was referring to at the beginning. And then in crisis times, where the action of HERA is supported by additional funds is aimed at timely responding to a given emergency by ensuring the availability of adequate and at-scale medical countermeasures to a specific situation. Although we may have the impression and the hope, I was a bit more pessimistic, but still we have the hope that COVID-19 is shading away. We are still facing complex situations across Europe and beyond. And therefore, a big portion of our daily work remains dedicated to the management, obviously, of the EU response to COVID-19, especially with the implementation of the EU vaccine strategy and the COVID-19 therapeutic strategy. But we also look into possibilities to early on identify and develop approaches to react to upcoming SARS-CoV-2 variants, not only of concern, but also of interest. So that is a very close monitoring. We have set up an expert group that advise HERA on this. And then we have been able also to set up, at least now for Omicron, a HERA Labs network to support the biological characterization of this variant. And that was very successful and guided us into the right direction when Omicron was appearing end of November last year. In addition, there's obviously work that was already initiated through the HERA incubator last year that has been proven to be very useful, like, for example, to increase the infrastructures and capacities in member states for genomic sequencing, and then also through Accelerate, which is a project that should create a clinical trials network. In addition, HERA is now also involved, as many other Commission services, as you know, involved in the management of support to the Ukraine, and we are collaborating with, here in particular, with DG ECHO and with DG Santé on medical aspects of the response to this war, and also in support of member states, in particular the neighboring countries, and Poland is certainly one of the most affected countries here. By all means, we are having. The HERA work plan is a plan that was published in February, I think. You might have seen it on the web as regards our activities to improve EU preparedness. That is all laid down in this first work plan for 2022. HERA was created October 21, so the work plan was developed relatively quickly, and we had to rely obviously on we could not to the full extent influence the different funding programs with our needs. But nevertheless, there's a lot of interesting and important projects going on. The HERA work plan was obviously discussed in depth with the HERA board, so with the member states. As you see, for 2022, there is a total budget of 1.3 billion foreseen, and that relies obviously on contributions from the EU for Health program. That's about 275 million. Horizon Europe is close to 400 million, and then about 600 million from the CPN rescEU budget. So that is something that is ongoing work, and we are working on implementing this around, in particular, the main 5 tasks. Starting with the threat assessment and the intelligence gathering. That is one of the main functions of HERA, to detect and assess emerging cross-border health threats, and also to identify appropriate medical countermeasures for these threats. So we work on establishing state-of-the-art real-time data and intelligence capacities on threats to see and identify medical countermeasures and enabling technologies that might be needed to work on such threats. We are also conducting a prioritization exercise, establishing scientific evidence on high-impact threats. That is obviously done in collaboration with the ECDC, but also with specialized colleagues from member states. And as part of the threat analysis, HERA will establish a list of critical medical countermeasures that respond to such main threats identified. We support also the promotion of research and innovation, or research and development of medical countermeasures, where the contribution from Horizon Europe obviously plays the substantial role on building on the existing calls from Horizon Europe for 2022. We have identified a number of activities that will improve and which are in line with our mission to improve the EU pandemic preparedness. For example, we're contributing to the development of next generation vaccines, horizon scanning for potential medical countermeasures, and innovative technologies against emerging pathogens, not to forget about the preclinical development of the next generation of immunotherapies. Looking ahead, we are currently working on the next Horizon Europe work program for 23 and 24 in a very meaningful and let's say co-creational process. and we try to make sure that that we have sufficient funding available to support HERA's mission over the next 2 years as well through the research program. We also look at addressing obviously market challenges and failures in the field of medical countermeasures. For example, by developing a prototype for a mapping platform on COVID-19 therapeutics and key raw materials. That is a key point. That would include data on supply chain production capacities inside and outside the EU and availability of EU therapeutics to the EU market. The idea at the end is obviously to extend that work to and that platform to on medical countermeasures, which are relevant for a response to emerging threats. And then in addition, we are setting up, and that is also known since a long time, the so-called EU FAB, which is going to be a network of reserved surge manufacturing capacities for vaccines and therapeutics in the EU. Then, of course, the work to ensure the provision of these medical countermeasures or medical products through procurement and stockpiling. That is something that needs to be methodologized, if that's an English word, but we are creating the environment to do so. And then there is also some training activities foreseen to strengthen knowledge and skills on medical countermeasures on the whole value chain, as it was depicted at the beginning, from assessment to deployment. So that is something where we try to organize this with member states, also at national and regional levels, for example, on public procurement practices, to have this more streamlined and more effective today. And then finally, we have a strong focus, obviously, on the international dimension, with several working arrangements that we are working on at the moment or discussing with third countries like the US, like Japan and others, as well as with international organizations such as WHO, such as CEPI, such as big foundations like the Gates Foundation and others, simply to make sure that we don't work in isolation and don't duplicate or triplicate work that is being done better somewhere else. But what we need is to make sure that we have access to all critical developments and critical knowledge around the identification, development and availability and deployment of medical countermeasures for critical cross-border health threats. So looking ahead, we have started to reflect now, and just depicted here a couple of examples around the 22 work plan. We started to reflect on the multi-annual strategy that we are where we put our priorities for the next years and try to align them obviously with the funding opportunities. I can only say, and that is, I've seen already a couple of questions here in the chat. We hope that HERA, with HERA, the EU is now better prepared for other health crises coming up. Although obviously it is not possible to predict what the next health crisis will be, but with HERA, as well as with many other initiatives currently ongoing at national, European, and global level, we are developing tools, much better knowledge and expertise, and a much better cooperation that will precisely allow us to ensure more rapid and adequate response in case of future health crisis. So thank you very much for your patience, and I apologize for this little bit long introduction to the topic. Eva, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Wolfgang. Indeed, that was actually quite a wide picture of what you are doing, and thanks for that. I think we all know a bit more at the moment, which is exactly the purpose of our meeting. I see quite some questions in the chat, and I promise I will come back to them in a few minutes. But let me maybe first ask some questions that I also prepared and I'm quite interested in. That is the question about the pandemic preparedness European partnership that it's at the moment being, let's say, developed. As most of us probably know, the whole discussion about European partnerships started a few years ago, and the first decisions were made exactly when the pandemic started. So this one was not on the list, of course, but jumped in the discussion already at the very beginning, let's say 2 years ago. But it took some time to prepare a bit the background and the basics for that. Now we hear that it's getting a bit closer. Could you please elaborate a bit more about the ambitions of the partnership, and also the timing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very pertinent point, and we had just a discussion and presentation to the advisory forum yesterday also on what we're doing within Horizon Europe and with the colleagues there to make sure that the things are aligned. So basically, the pandemic preparedness partnership you are referring to is, as you said, is currently being set up, and that is it's a partnership that is with member states in the lead, and that will focus on a comprehensive, more streamlined research agenda for pandemic preparedness. But as you also know, this partnership will not materialize immediately, and the coordination so far and coordination, how do they call it? CSA coordination and support action is starting next month with the signature of a contract, while the formal process of designing this pandemic preparedness partnership will be in the course of 23 and 24. So that is quite a while in the future. What this partnership will do, and that is what we know, is will aim to develop a strategic research and innovation agenda for pandemic preparedness, while creating also an overview of lessons learned from the current pandemic, and certainly also referring to the past pandemic, because many of the lessons learned fit and you find them in reports of the past pandemic and the past epidemics that we have been dealing with. So the Commission will therefore facilitate the discussion at member state level, and we at HERA are definitely going to be part of that process. That is for sure. So the partnership is also instrumental once it's running and set up for helping us at HERA in achieving our objectives, but it's important to avoid any duplication. So this is the baseline. It's not going to happen. But we also have to see that we need to align here a little bit the timelines of activities starting in HERA and then the development and the shaping of the partnership. And then obviously it's not just the member states on the RTD side involved. We yesterday agreed also that the HERA advisory forum, you know, this technical advisory forum, may be consulted on the strategic research and innovation agenda for pandemic preparedness. So it will be a very comprehensive and inclusive process.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Indeed, this still needs some time. So basically, as you said, we will mostly use lessons learned from current pandemic to prepare for future ones. Although we all hope that something like that will not happen, but we also all know that we have to be prepared. So that's more the goal than to still deal with the current one, obviously. But yeah, the timing now it's clear. Okay, I will now go to the chat. We have quite some questions that were, first of all, also asked before the event, but also now they are coming up. So I will put some of them on the screen. And since we are still in the Horizon Europe and research topic, maybe I will start with the one that it's in the chat, and the last one basically, that it's also referring to the forum you mentioned, this advisory forum. and the scientific advice from there? Is it somehow incorporated how you manage this?
So basically, the question is how does HERA incorporate scientific evidence in the decision making, as academia and research centers do not have a dedicated structure within the advisory forum? Yeah, I mean that is we have to be very clear here. The advisory forum is based on so the advisory forum is composed of people that were nominated by the member states, but we obviously expect that these colleagues would reach out to the relevant scientific communities when it comes to pandemic preparedness and when it comes to, let's say, identifying and setting priorities in pandemic preparedness research. So that is on the side of HERA. So that's what we expect. Obviously, we have not a fully decentralized and fully open forum here. Because that is something we could never handle, and there would be probably a lot of conflicting requests coming in. The second element, which is perhaps even more important, is that obviously at RTD the colleagues dealing with Horizon Europe, which is the program that is the funding program for science and for research and innovation. With these colleagues, they have the structures in place, so we follow that. We are part of this co-creation process. We are part of the discussions with the program committee, and I would expect that on that side as well, there's a reach out to the academic and public research structures in the countries to identify the priorities and to set the focus here. So through the advisory forum and through the structures, the institutionalized structures under Horizon Europe, we are quite confident that we have a very large reach out. A third point is obviously, if there's anything that comes up to your mind, if there's anything that is not covered and must be covered in the opinion of an academic institution or a research institute or whoever has the capacities and the expertise to comment on this, just reach out to us by email, by phone. I mean, communication should not be the problem.
Okay, thank you. One stakeholder is indeed the scientific community, the other is industry. And we also have a question about the collaboration with industry. You also mentioned this joint industrial cooperation forum. So if you could say a bit more about this angle of HERA cooperation with external stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, with civil society, that's one point. That was a strong request coming from the political side. That makes full sense because we want to cover all stakeholders, all stakeholders that might have a say in how our societies should be better prepared for future pandemics or health emergencies. So on the industrial side, as you've seen in the communication, it was already requested, or there was already remarked that we would send up a joint industrial cooperation forum. We have seen now during the pandemic also a lesson learned that a close cooperation with critical industries, and that is not just the end producer of medical countermeasures, but also producers and suppliers of critical compounds and elements for such medical countermeasures, is absolutely important to resolve bottlenecks and to accelerate access to access development and access to medical countermeasures. So at the moment we are in the process of setting up the Joint Industrial Cooperation Forum as a subgroup of the HERA Advisory Forum, and we received a number of applications which will be evaluated and the whole way, or the whole approach here is that we have a single channel access access from industry to discussion on HERA's work, but also the other way around, that we establish the necessary contacts with the industry that might be needed in the future to identify and resolve bottlenecks, and this within and outside of the EU, to overcome all of these market failures that we have seen, in particular in the first year, and the second year of the pandemic. So what we want is to have an open channel of discussion with industry to make sure that limits in production capacities of critical medical countermeasures and raw materials are overcome. We will also encourage new industrial partnerships facilitated by the organization of pan-European matchmaking events. So that's another plan. And this is obviously building on the work which is carried out by the what is called the task force for industrial scale up of COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics, which had been created originally by the colleagues, and which is run at the moment by the colleagues of DG GROW. So we need to establish these contacts to be able and ready in the future to react more swiftly and to have the right contacts to unlimit the production capacities for critical medical countermeasures, and that's done through these two channels.
Okay, thanks a lot for clarifications on this. But I think we will still stay in the HERA governance because there's another question now referring not to the advisory board, but not to the advisory forum, but to the HERA board. And the composition changes of members, and also the question goes into details about the possibility to get access to minutes and decisions made by the board. Could you please let us know what's the idea behind?
Publish the current composition. I would need to check with my colleagues. We always have a problem here with the and this is not. This is a serious matter. We always have a problem here with the data protection rules. So that's something I need to check. I can get back to you in writing on this. Eventual changes on a regular basis, I mean, that is something that is going to be communicated by the member states to HERA. So if they nominate another representative, that is going to happen. I think the minutes of the discussions in the HERA board, we had 2 meetings so far. I think the minutes should be should be published. The second point is on decisions made by the board. The board as such does not have a dedicated decision-making mechanism. The board is there to discuss the work of HERA, to discuss setting the priorities and so on and so forth. But it is not a decision-making process as we have it under what we call comitology in certain committees where member states have a real voting possibilities for specific decisions, for example, for program implementation and so on and so forth. So that is not the case. The board is a board where discussions happen between member states and HERA to make sure that we align activities and that we set the right priorities at the right time. On the first point, I'll get back to you in writing.
Okay, thank you. Now that we have a question that goes a bit into the different ways of EU member states responded to the crisis. That it's now, of course, quite clear. We see the different methods. There was also a bit of chaos, of course, at the beginning. And the question is basically, are there any plans on in-depth evaluation and promotion of the best practices, let's say, for the future, as this is also part of HERA's activity?
Yeah. I mean, in general, obviously, the EU member states, I think the comment here is very important. several EU member states responded to the COVID crisis in diverse ways. That's true. But if you really condense the responses down to the essential elements, I think we will see that this was done not so differently in the different member states. There might have been there was a different development of the pandemic in the different member states, and hence the response capacity or the response means were different at different times. There was obviously also not a full agreement on what is the best method to use at what stage. I think it was a long learning process, this whole pandemic, and that is exactly one of the points that we want to work on in HERA. So this intelligence gathering and threat assessment. That is not just to be faster in identifying potential threats and assessing these potential threats before these potential threats become real threats or become expanded threats. So that's one of the elements. But what we also need is definitely better and stronger recommendations on what to do at what moment. And as I said, this is not a black and white. This is very often not a black and white decision, but very often a matter of having a good assessment and then reducing the risks as much as possible in the right way. Lessons learned processes have started already all over the map. You're certainly aware of that by different organizations, and I fear that we will have a flood, again, a tsunami of lessons learned exercises. But what is important at the end is that whatever is coming out of these lessons learned exercises, that we have the right insight into what needs to be changed, that we have the possibility to correct these failures, that we have the possibility to fund the correction of these failures, and that we end up in a more cooperative approach to deal with health crisis in the future. So HERA as well, we're considering lessons learned. Obviously, we must do our lessons learned exercise from the current pandemic, but focusing here really on the availability of medical countermeasures, and that includes everything starting from PPE to syringes down to the most complex medical countermeasures. And for instance, just an example, one of the HERA calls for proposals under the EU for Health program is intended to support member states in the assessment as well of procurement practices in the health sector to enhance procurement of medical countermeasures in case of need, because that was also something that we were suffering of. But this is just one example. I hope, and I think, even if the answer was not fully to the question, looking at any plans for in-depth evaluations, I think lessons learned, that is for me an evaluation of a certain situation. And as I said, if that is done, we will do it regarding medical countermeasures and everything around the whole value chain to have access to medical countermeasures. That is what we are looking at, and then we hopefully will be able to set up a system here at HERA that would function better in the future.
Okay, so it's actually quite good to know that you have this overall picture as well. Many things that were related to the pandemic, not only the vaccines or therapeutics going directly into solving the problem, but also everything else that was affecting us because of this lockdown and because of other problems related to this. Okay, we have a question, very short and direct. Will HERA fund the development of new antibiotics?
That's again a very good question. So what HERA is doing is not to fund directly the development of a specific medical countermeasure. It really depends. It really depends what it is. But we start. It's a short question, you get a long answer. We start obviously with the threat assessment and the health prioritization, and here we are developing a methodology at the moment to prioritize for at least 3 threats. That was also mentioned in the communication, and then to see are relevant medical countermeasures available for these threats. What I can say already, AMR, antimicrobial resistance, as a very huge public health concern, is certainly one of these threats that would be considered as a priority. And what we have been doing for the moment is to put in place preparatory actions under the EU for Health 21 work program. That is, and these prep actions, they're intending to assess the latest AMR medical countermeasures, so across the whole field of antimicrobials and the needs in different member states. The result of this study will underpin HERA's decision making in terms of new antibiotics. We also start in terms of we hope that we get an idea about the need for new antibiotics very specifically coming out of this. We are also launching studies, or we have been launching studies that look into stockpiling of antibiotics and needs across the EU. So once this is done, we would need to decide if we would have possibilities to fund the pulling through of antibiotic compounds if identified in the pipeline somewhere. So that is a bit cryptic, the answer, but we are not per se a funding organization. As I said, this is done through when it comes to research through Horizon Europe. But if we identify critically important compounds, including antibiotics, in the pipeline, we would see how we could fund an incentive to get such products produced and get it into the market.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a question that is actually going into the equitable access policy that might HERA have. And the question is basically whether indeed this is included in the planning and the policy behind HERA, and are there any clauses that are guaranteeing the equitable access and affordability of medical countermeasures?
So a very complex question and a very complex thing to talk about equitable access policy. I think that is nothing I could really answer in a minute. I mean, for us, equal access to healthcare, I mean, this is just a basic right to all EU citizens, regardless where they live, what their gender, status, age, economic status, whatever is. No? That is something which is, and I think here we refer again to the pandemic. That is something we have seen that's even more important to keep that in mind in case of a health emergency and in case of need for access to healthcare. So HERA, just to repeat that, was set up to strengthen our ability to prevent, detect, and rapidly respond to cross-border health emergencies, and this by ensuring the development, the manufacturing, the procurement, and equitable distribution of key medical countermeasures. So that is what I can say. That is what is written, and that is the underlining mantra of our work we are doing. Equitable affordability of medical countermeasures is a much more complex point, but equitable access, that is something we have been doing here at the EU level when it comes to vaccines. So the vaccine steering board and the vaccine strategy, we have seen that all countries had equitable access to vaccines. They got them all delivered at the same time and could start their vaccination programs at the same time. The same for things like joint procurements were organized for personal protective equipment. but also for antivirals or monoclonal antibodies against COVID-19, where our countries were invited to participate, and they all had access to their needs and of these products, and they all had the same price to pay for the product. So that is what we certainly would continue to do as we are working here in a true European effort.
Thank you for this. Our time is slowly coming to an end, but I hope we can still maybe have two last questions. One is asking a bit more in details about the possible role of cities and local governments in the health risk management, and is this also incorporated in the planning of HERA?
No, I can give a short answer. I mean, here the risk management for cross-border health threats is not currently under the remit of HERA, but that is done by the ECDC, and so that's the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, that was quick. And then there is a question going into possible working groups on the effects of long COVID. Are there any established by HERA?
Not by HERA, at least not so far. And it is also not planned for the moment, but it is definitely something that I'm sure colleagues in other commission service will look into this to find solutions. Not to find solutions, but to find let's say more generalized methodologies to look into the effects of and to be able to respond to the effects of long COVID.
Okay. So we still actually have 1 minute. So if you allow me, I will still put one more question. Are there any activities planned that are aiming at reducing civilization diseases risk? Have different problems, not only strictly COVID like possible future pandemics. So is there anything else in the pipeline?
That aiming at reducing. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I mean, when it comes to support of neighboring countries to the Ukraine or Ukraine directly, with HERA we are looking into, and we have been through the HERA board been in contact with all member states multiple times in meetings and in writing to find out what the needs are. So we would look into possibilities to support the countries in closing their certain gaps, or in making sure that certain vaccines are available or treatment would be available. That is done by HERA. It's also done by colleagues in other services. So much about, and we were, for example, successful in getting tetanus or DT vaccines donated from big pharma companies to Ukraine. I mean, that is something we are looking into and we can do. But in general, I mean, we are focusing on serious cross-border health threats, and we focus on the critical medical countermeasures. So that includes in general the swift procurement and distribution of such MCMs, also outside of coming out of certain stockpiles. But we are not looking at the moment. We are not looking at the moment at HIV, tuberculosis, or infectious diseases. We have been looking, obviously, and discussing this with the agencies. The needs here for treatment of people with AIDS to not interrupt the treatment. The same for tuberculosis, and the same, obviously, for the availability of make sure that relevant vaccines, polio, others, are available at the amount needed to prevent any kind of incident here. So, but this is in particular in relation to the situation and to the war and the effects of the war in Ukraine.
Okay, thank you for the answer to this question, and in general, a big thank you for being with us today. That was the last question. Our time is up. I think we found out quite a lot about HERA, about the background, the planning, the ambitions, and we will surely follow future activities also from our side, from the National Center for Strategy and Development, and in Poland, very much interested also in Horizon Europe and the partnership as well. So we will maybe come back to you in some time to see the progress and to discuss a bit more about the results of the projects that are now being in the negotiation phase or just the very beginning. So again, thank you very much for being with us, for answering all the questions. And I hope with the participants, we will also see each other at some other Brussels Talks events on other topics in future months. And for the recording, please contact us via email. This is brussels@ncbr.gov.pl, and we will respond to your question. And as I mentioned before, you will also get Wolfgang's presentation later on via email. So that's it for today. Have a nice rest of the day, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.